Yeah, so everyone, I'm here today with a man that truly defines. This is the definition of the living legend. A
Thank you very
giant,
much.
a giant figure in the aquarium hobby, in the aquarium industry, and beyond, and beyond.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
if you don't know who Mr. Heiko Blair is, and there's many newcomers to the hobby all the time, and
All the
especially
time.
in the social media age that we're
Yes.
in. They're coming into high level aquarium keeping, and they're keeping fish like the rummy nose tetra. They're keeping plants like the Amazon sword. They're keeping fish like the cardinal tetra, which we're going to talk about. And they don't even understand that the second name in the scientific name, Blairi, is the work of the legendary Heiko Blair. Heiko,
Thank you.
welcome
Thank
to
you very
Aquarium
much.
Everything podcast. It's an
Thank you.
honor, and this is a big deal to me, to be perfectly honest. It's a big deal because I've been in the hobby and in the industry for some years now myself, and so I know this history before internet, before everybody's seeing everything all the time. And
Yes.
so the work that you've done over the past many decades is some of the most vital and important and some of the most significant contributions to the hobby and the industry, and like I say, and beyond, because I think there's a broader environmental mission in what you've
Yes.
done too in your
Yes.
work that's more important now maybe than
Definitely.
ever before.
Right.
So
Very right.
normally I don't like to do the normal interview sequence of getting the whole background, but because I think there's a lot of young people entering the hobby today, and even just people that don't know the history and the significance. Uh, could you give us just a brief background on?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
First of all, I do this as long as I can remember. No? When my mother took me with 4 to Africa, with 7, 8, 9, 10 to the Amazon, and my grandfather, he already started with this and had the largest ornamental fish uh, nursery and aquarium plant nursery in the year 1900. I mean, that's
Wow.
122 years ago. And it went on to my mother, and my mother, naturally, with all her expeditions, took me into it from my youth. And it's very interesting, I have to mention, because my grandfather had 4 children, and my mother was the only one who followed his footsteps. And my mother had 4 children, and I'm the only one following her footsteps. So now I have a daughter which was born exactly 100 years after my mother, her grandmother. So I gave her the same name. So her name is Amanda Flora Blair, but she's now 12 years, and she has made with me already 6 expeditions, and she wants to do more. But because of family problems and separations, it's the moment it's at a standstill. But anyhow, I have had the advantage to grow into this. And then I was in the United States, in Florida, for 2 years working at the time, I think it was the largest fish farm in America, maybe in the world, Gold Fish Farm, run by Ross Sokoloff, which I think some of you know. He was also a real legend and a very, 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 very good person. Ross was like a father to me. And at these 2 years I worked at his farm, which then went over to Axelrod, he told me I can go to the university at nighttime. So I did 2 years study of ichthyology, limnology, oceanography, and parasitology at the University of South Florida. But you know, the people at university, they told me, you have not registered, you have not gotten the permit and everything else. And I said, look, I'm not interested and do not want a doctor title. Because if I want a doctor title, I can buy it on the internet anytime I want. Like I know people who did. For $5,000, you have a doctor title. Anyhow, I said, I want to learn and I want to assist all the classes. And he said, okay, if it's on your own, you can come. So I was there 2 years and I went every day from 5 to 10. And, you know, after that, I really said, no more for the rest of my life. I will work for anyone. I will have, even if I have it very hard, I do my own. And I went collecting and I started my company, Aquarium Rio, which existed for 33 years. I had it first in Rio de Janeiro. This is why it was called Aquarium Rio. And I was every single month collecting fish within Brazil, in parts of South America. I brought them to Rio, I acclimatized them, and I sold them to 89 countries in the world. But after 2 years, most of the importers had not paid me. They always said the fish were dead, you know. So I said, I have to move to where the biggest airport is. And already there, and I think until today, the biggest airport is in Frankfurt. And I moved there and I opened my company there, and I sold fish from there all over the world, bringing them from every part of the planet, Africa, Asia, Australasia, and I went all on these expeditions myself, because I think it's now a little over 8,000 freshwater fish species are introduced into the hobby. Wow. So many of these fishes you have today is from those I brought. My advantage was always, and still is today, I just came back from a fantastic expedition 10 days ago, that I go to places where no one else goes. I go to such remote places, which is very, very difficult and naturally very costly. So in the last decade or so, I take 1 or 2 friends with me to share cost, because I have never done an expedition that cost less than $10,000, and some of them even more, because you have to charter a plane, you have to charter a boat, you have to get special vehicles and permits. And naturally, it's more and more difficult to get the right permits. This is the biggest problem of all. In any event, in '97, I moved out of my company. I sold it, actually. I closed it. I said, for the rest of my life, I had already published several books. I published the first big book on discus in 1982. But then I have written, you can see it on my website, I have written thousands of articles about ornamental fish and about the environment and about collecting and so on, water parameters, etc. But then I started to do 5 very, very big books. And the first one was Blair's Discus Volume 1. It maybe is the wrong title, because I have written the entire history of the Amazon. The Brazilian government wrote to me and said, no one in history has written so much and so many details about the Amazon as you. And most of the Amazon is in Brazil, as you know. No? And in the meanwhile, that was translated in 13 languages, also online. And then I did Volume 2, and I'm still working on my Volume 3, which will finalize the history of discus. But then I wrote other books. And I wrote this very big book on biotopes, for instance. In the meanwhile, this is the most sold books of all because it's in 7 languages, and I sell it every day all over the world. It has about 50 of my no, not 50, more than 50, at least a few percent of my expeditions. I completed last month my 981st expedition. So I'm coming close to 1,000. And that's in 223 countries. Many people don't realize that the planet, on the planet we have 240 countries. I mean, that's governments. That's it's not what you find in the internet. They will tell you there's only 198. This is not true. These countries have their own identity. They have their own visa, their own passports, and I have been in most of them, actually, all the big ones also, except Mongolia. I still need to go to Mongolia. I'm doing this next year. But doing so many expeditions, I do an average of at least 10 every year. This year it's 11. Last year it was also 11. But some years it was even 16 because all of my expeditions are in the turn of 8 to 14 days. This is the advantage of today's transport, except for the year 2020 pandemic. Every plane was on the ground. There was no plane flying.
Yeah.
But every year else, I have done so many expeditions, and I always go to what I said earlier, to the places where no one goes. But doing these many expeditions and bringing back so many fish, today it is more difficult than it was in the past, simply because there's not so many people anymore interested in rare fishes, at least in some parts. They have, the masses of fishes have taken over. I mean, like in Walmarts, you will not find any rare or different fish. You find 20 species, that's it. And mostly not in good conditions also. But anyhow, there are shops, especially in Europe and even now in China, probably more than anywhere else, because I am invited every year to China, except for this year and except for last 2 years. The last time I was in China invited was 2019. But before that, I was invited almost yearly. And they have aquarium shops. They are just out of this world.
I know. The scene is massive there.
They're incredible, and they care for it.
Sure.
You know, I brought in my handbag 40 books of biotopes in English, and hardly anyone reads English in China. In 1 hour, I had them all sold, and that was for 4 days exhibit. They are crazy. They are really crazy for. They are. I would say today the aquarium hobby is more evolved in China than it was in Europe in the 50s and 60s.
I mean, there's always been Asian cultures have always had a passion for aquariums.
Yes, and
So a lot of questions come to mind from all of this.
Go ahead.
But a couple of things that I just want to establish for maybe even primarily for the newer hobbyists or the people newer to this thing is there's two specific species, one a fish, and so this is what we call the rummy-nosed tetra. So could you, because this is obviously with the popularity of things like keeping discus, which a rummy-nosed tetra is often a tank mate, aquascapes, etc. What is this story?
Okay, the story, in a long story to make it short, is that in 1928, a German Aal described a fish which from then on was called rummy-nose, and that was Hemigrammus rhodostomus. Today it's in the genus Pedidella. And I was in 65 I mean, this was a fish found by collectors, German collectors, and the German scientists described it as Rhodostomus, and the Americans named it Ruminose tetra. It was found in the area of Belém. It only lives near the mouth of the Amazon River, but in fresh water naturally. And it's a swarming fish, a schooling fish. In '65 is when I first started to collect and import fish from Manaus to my establishment in Rio. I went up, and I actually wrote several times about this, and I came up to a river called Jufaris, which is also a blackwater river, and it's the affluent of the Rio Negro, largest blackwater river of the world. And I found this fish there, which then the exporters in Manaus told me, but this is a Ruminose tetra. I said, no, this is a different fish. Its school's different, has much more color. The tail is smaller, the color of the tail is different, and it has this bright red color, and it goes from the mouth all the way along the sides up until near the dorsal fin. So that alone already makes it very different. Besides this, it is a fantastic schooling fish because I showed for the first time some years ago 500 of them in one aquarium. And I did it again at Interzoo 2018. They swim around like this all the time, non-stop, day and night. And the people see this and they just can't believe it. They look at it non-stop. So a friend of mine did put 1,000 in an aquarium. You should see the video. If you put 1,000 of these in an aquarium, it's out of the sight. It's breathtaking. The third species in this group is called formerly Petitella Georgia, and it's only found in the very upper Amazon River region, in the Marañón and its affluents. And this is the largest of the three. I mean, Jacques Géry described all of these, except the first, which was done by Ahl. And the third one is the largest of all, but it has the least ruminose, practically none. And it has a black stripe on the side. So there are still aquarists that mix this up. But if they get it from Peru, they definitely get only Petitella Georgia. If they get it from Manaus, they only get Hemigrammus blairi. And if they get it from Belém, they only get Rhodostomus. But
So
they all
interesting.
three now, some scientists, I think 2 years ago, decided they should all be in one genus. So they're all three now called Petitella. Petitella Georgia, Petitella blairi, and Petitella Rhodostomus.
Okay. So that's quite a revision of the
Yeah,
many
that's
countless.
I don't know. You know, sometimes you cannot interfere in the work of scientists, but he found characters which, I mean, the fish has been in the aquarium hobby often confused. So having it in one genus now, it probably is more intelligent. I'm
Sure.
in favor for it.
Sure. Now there was a recent period here too, just on the topic of that fish, where we were unable to get them for a pretty long period of time. They seemed to be suppliers suddenly could not get them. Is there a clear reason for that you're aware of, or?
I think, first of all, the biggest exporter from Manaus, he closed down. But there are other people in Manaus, and they can only get this fish from Manaus. Now, I have to add that I found the same species, blairi, in affluents of the upper Orinoco River. This was actually only this millennium. And
Wow.
at that time, this fish was in literature of Colombian people and the Colombian government was written as Hemigrammus rhodostomus. And I made them aware that they are doing a big error. That's the fish which is found in the Rio Negro system. And all of this was actually connected. It's all black water. The fish only comes from black water. And the one from Colombia, affluent of the Rio Negro, upper Rio Negro, and of the Rio Inirida, it's all black water. This is the same fish. You can see the difference between the one from Brazil by the tail. Interestingly, the one shipped out of Colombia is always shipped out of Rhodostomus. The exporters still, after about 100 years, use the same name. They are shipped out as Rhodostomus, but they are Blairi. You can see them immediately. They have the same red. They have all the same characters, except in the tail, between the white and black stripes, they have a yellow spot. So that's the only difference.
Yeah.
But they should be able to get them as Rhodostomus from Bogota. They should be able to get them as, I think, as Blairi from Manaus. But this is the only two places you can get them. The importer.
This is still a fish that's it's abundant. The numbers are still good in the wild.
Yes,
you feel like
very good.
Okay.
There are millions.
Okay.
Because it's swarming fish, and you can only collect it during the dry season. So that's only 3-4 months out of the year. So the rest of the year, no one can collect them. It's the same
Right.
as with Altum angels or other fishes.
Sure.
Many are
We don't have
fishes.
there's not a significant population threat at this point on something like Rummy-nosed tetra. Still
You have to,
still
you
in
should
good
get
shape
it.
from your experience.
Yes, they're definitely good shape. No question.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So the other species that everybody knows is what we call Amazon sword, Echinoderus blairi.
Blairi, yeah.
Blairi.
It's-
So is
you
this?
have to-
I believe the story goes. Your mother is responsible for this one. No.
Well, in my new book, the biotopes, Blair's biotopes, I have actually photos of it. I discovered it in 1962, before I came to
Okay.
America. And I brought it to my mother. She had a cultivation already since 1959 outside of Rio de Janeiro, cultivation of aquarium plants, big one, which I helped to build. And she actually cultivated, and she started to export it. She exported it. I mean, I was just recently in Australia, and my dearest friend there, he just turned 86. He said, I got the first ones of those plants for my mother, and we are breeding it here. But today this plant is, to my knowledge, the most sold aquarium plant on the planet. And
Easily.
it's cultivated all over the planet, all over.
Yeah.
They cultivate it by the millions in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in many parts of Asia today, and not anymore in Europe. Almost no one, because the heating cost and so on. It's not being cultivated in Europe, but it's been in all of Asia cultivated very much.
It's one I find even people. This is the first aquarium plant. This is their point of entry into having live plants in the aquarium. It's just a very important piece of history to me.
And it's easy to grow. Yes, it's 1986. It was described after my mother because it was in the I have to look it up, but I think it was 1970, 72, 73, that scientist from the Czech Republic, Rataj, he was the most knowledgeable person at that time about the family Alismataceae, which it belongs to. And he revised the genus Echinodorus, because the genus is Echinodorus blairi. And he revised the genus. I actually published it in my magazine in the 1990s. It's a very nice book, because he was the only one who cultivated all, at that time, known 62 different species of Echinodorus. So he, in this publication, also described several. Maybe you have heard of Echinodorus osiris. Maybe you have heard of Echinodorus portalegrensis. Maybe you have heard of Echinodorus opacus, and also Blairi. He described all of these species which we found.
Wow.
And Blairi was the one I found. I remember the place. I went back, but today at the same place where I found it are only high rises. The whole biotop, everything is destroyed.
Really? Oh, really?
The habitat doesn't exist anymore. No fish, no plant, no nothing. Just buildings and buildings and buildings.
Aye.
But this is all over all over the world.
It's true. It's true. So that plant, are you saying it couldn't be found in the wild anymore?
I did not find it anymore. I did not find it anymore. Definitely not.
Wow.
And I went back a few times. No, I did not find it. I found another new Echinodorus, which Rattay then still named, but he named it Hycoblairi. So he gave it a double species name.
Okay.
The disadvantage is that I brought this back to companies like Aquaflora and Anubias in Europe, but it disappeared. I don't see it anymore. And this is the second Echinodorus I found which only lives submerged, only underwater. When it goes very, very low, the water level in nature, it does not grow out.
Maybe that could speak to why a nursery may struggle with it.
Yes,
they tend to
cultivate
everything to struggle with
above water. Yes, sure.
The pure submerged species are tricky, but I'm trying to understand or just have the sensation a little bit.
Tell me.
Of like coming upon something like that, or that discovery of a new species, or is this just what is that like for? How does that feel? What's in your mind or your body when you find something new like that?
I have many people do not believe this, but having studied fishes all my life and freshwater, naturally, very little brackish, some brackish, but almost zero marine. I have dedicated myself to this because my mother did it, my grandfather did it also. And I actually, you can ask me for about 15,000 freshwater fish names, I can tell you. But you ask me about 10 names of friends and I cannot remember. I will always remember you and Mike, there's no problem. But anyhow,
sure.
Because of this knowledge, and I don't know how many millions of copies I did before the internet started of all publications of every single freshwater fish. I have files and files and files and files of all freshwater fishes, whatever had been published before internet started, I have. So that gave me naturally a lot of knowledge, and I have had the experience throughout the 30 years I worked with what I consider was one of the best known scientists in the world, ichthyologists, Jacques Fieri, the Frenchman. He spoke perfect German and English also. And he always had problem with Weizmann in Washington, D.C., at the Smithsonian, which was your most famous American specialist on tetras, caracoids. No? And Jacques Fieri was the only one in the world who ever wrote a book about the caracoids of the world, because they only live in Central, South, and Africa, Central America and South America, and in Africa. No other place. And with him, I learned during 30 years, we lived very close, I learned during 30 years how to identify new species in nature. And since then, I mean, this goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, I never missed. I never missed. You know, when I have found the now Pedidella blairi, Jacques said, I cannot describe it. I need other materials. So I went to collect, but I said it's a new species. And it took him 17 years to describe it. This is often how long it takes. A good scientist will take a long time to really verify with all other existing species in that family or in the genus to make it a new species. That's what should be done always. I'm doing a scientific journal for 28 years now. I just had to stop the publication because it became too expensive. So we have it only online now since last year. And with this, naturally, I also learned so much in addition to my knowledge. But if I'm in nature, I just came back from 3 expeditions last month in Colombia. I was in the Vaupés River in an area where no one has ever gone before, looking for fish or for plant, no one. And I found 150 different freshwater fish species. And I found at least of these 25 are new, completely new, unknown, never seen before, including one which is the maximum size 9 millimeters. So that's what, a quarter of an inch, adult.
Yeah.
And I have excellent photos of it. And it's hard to believe that such small fish exist, such small vertebrates. But I already am looking for the smallest fishes for many, many years now. You know, in my book about the Indian ornamental fishes, I showed one species I found in India, border with Bhutan. I actually was in Bhutan, which was on the tip of my finger, covered only half of it. And then I measured it, and it was 6.9 millimeter adult, and it doesn't grow any bigger. I verified it a long time, but it's still not described.
This is a true nano fish.
Yes,
this is real nano.
I mean, they always say in the internet which are the smallest vertebrates on the planet. I think I already found them. These are the smallest vertebrates. There's nothing smaller than this. And then if you go back to the origin of fishes, you know, I give so many lectures and seminars around the world. Not during the pandemic time. They canceled 39 of mine. But it started this year again. And I have several coming up for next year. And I show the people this. And I think it's so important that people learn more about freshwater species, because they are the oldest creatures on this planet. I was just in February. Yes? What did you want to say?
When you arrive on you're going to a new area, you know good and well. Anyone who's been there, they certainly weren't there looking for new species or any such thing. There probably was no one there at all anyway. And so you're arriving in this place. Do you just have a sort of a feeling about, let's stop here?
Yes.
And,
yes.
And then we just, this is it. Something just comes, a feeling in the body. Something just says, this is the spot.
Yes.
We get out of the boat.
Definitely.
Are you getting in the water? Is there a net comes out, or what? Walk us through that sequence. What this?
Yeah, I just tell you about the last month, November. I had a very, very nice, very young, 21-year-old boy from Chile. He's an amazing guy. He called me up just about 8 days before I was leaving Italy, and he was in Padova, Italy. And maybe you don't know, but Padova has the oldest university on the planet. It exists almost 1,000 years. And he came from Chile to study in this university in Italy biology. He studies biology. And he said, Mr. Blair, you know, I know you since my 11th year and always been reading and hearing about you. I want to come on your next expedition. I said, it's in 1 week. This was end of October. And he said, and I said, how can you make this? You are from Chile, you're studying. Yeah, but my semester here at the university are finished, only starting again in January or February, I don't know. And I don't care what, I want to come with you. So he flew from Milan to Santiago de Chile. And from Santiago de Chile, he flew to Bogota to meet me, because I said, you have to meet me on this and this day there. Then you can come with me. So anyhow, this boy went to me in every creek. We chartered a plane to go to Mitu. And from Mitu, we went up the river into all the side rivers where I had known that no one went before. And exactly as you asked just a few minutes ago, every time the boat came by one place, I said, stop here. And we walked into this side creek. Some of them almost impossible to get through because they're all fallen trees. No? All the jungle untouched. The trees eventually fall into the water, into the river. And you have to climb over all the trees in order to get into the biotope. And this boy followed me everywhere, barefoot. He followed me barefoot, going over the woods and trees. And he actually, because I made him aware how to find some new fish, I said, go there and you will find a new killifish, because no one was here. And he found 2 new killifishes.
Wow.
I found only 1 killifish new,
right.
But I found 25 other species. But he's very smart and very humble and very good. But this was just to explain to you how I work.
Yeah, you just kind of know. And then is there, after all these years, there's still, I presume, some delight or some sort of excitement or
oh yes,
that is a new. And you know it when you see it, I suppose. So the fish comes up and you're going, wow, here's something new.
99 out of 100%, I knew this is a new species.
Yeah.
And he learned it from me. He saw it. He said, this is unknown. This is not known. Or sometimes, naturally, this is a known species, but it has never been recorded from here, you know.
It sounds like there could even be a almost endless, I mean, could a humans even ever find all this species in the depths and the areas unexplored? It seems like it just could go on and on and on.
Yes, and you know what? The worst problem is, and this is what I fear, that all of these places where these species live, they will not be there for future generations. Everything Everything is disappearing at a speed you cannot believe. You know, I was 7-8 years ago. My mother took me in the Amazon. It was only forest, animals everywhere. I saw thousands and thousands of macaws flying every morning over my head, because they fly towards the sunrise. The same in the evening. I went with these guys now to areas where no one has been, only Indian tribes live. And we saw in 8 days 2 macaws. This is, wow. And no other animal. There's no animal in places where no one lives. And then I go to the Indian chief and I say, tell me, when I was young, I came here all the time and I saw animals like you see it in the movies, like you see it in the zoo. And I don't see animals anymore. I don't see anta, tapir. I don't see jaguars. I don't see monkeys. I don't see parrots. I don't see birds. This old Indian chief is almost my age. He said, you know, when I came with my grandfather, he came from Brazil, walking into this area of the Amazon, which now belongs to Colombia. He said, I saw, like you in your childhood, I saw hundreds and hundreds and thousands of animals. But in the meanwhile, like where we live here now, this community is only about 250 Indians But in the area lived 27 Indian tribes, and they're all the same size. And they have no other protein. Some of the rivers have very few fishes because this is black water. And with black water, you don't find many species because the fishes don't have enough food. So black water rivers are actually, because they are very, very acid and very low conductivity, the fishes cannot live. They cannot find mosquito larvae. They cannot find larvae, nothing. So when I was young, coming back to this old man, he said, like what you tell me, but now they come here and they eat all. Every Indian tribes even kills every snake and eats it, every monkey, every macaw, every bird, every anta, every jaguar, everything has been eaten. And I find this globally. I was in July, 1 month in the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. I've also found several new species because they gave me a permit to go to some parks. But wherever I went, when I saw a monkey, they just killed it, they were frying it. Every animal they eat. The natives now, the population has naturally grown tremendously, also under Indian tribes or natives in Africa or whatever, and they have no other income of protein. Maybe not enough fish. So they eat every animal, right. Every single animal. And so this is the danger, and this really is non-stoppable. There's no WWF, there's no any organization who is doing anything against it. They protect it under CITES, they protect it under CITES, they protect it in all kind of papers, but not in the nature. No one protects anything in the nature where they come from.
So there's actually a problem of the native tribes over consuming the animals. Wow. I have never heard that. I've never heard it. I mean, because obviously I'm just getting the media propaganda is telling me whatever stories.
You know, I watched now television because I wanted to see the game, Argentina versus France. France was 4 years ago the world champion, but Argentina deserved it. But anyhow, I wanted to see. But normally I never ever touch television. You know, even in all the hotels I'm invited, I turn it immediately off. I don't believe in it. I don't care what channel it is, or they talk about animals or nature. It is all fake. It is all not true. The people who do this, they have no idea about nature. They have really they go, you know, like they go once in their lifetime in the Amazon and they write about the Amazon. I finally wrote about the Amazon when I did 330 expeditions into almost every angle of the Amazon. Now I have done over 550. But I mean, I got knowledge about it because I saw it. And I only believe what I see. Right. And this is the same in television. I don't believe in television because I cannot verify if this is true or if it's manipulated, as they do with almost everything. Yes. And
that contradicts your own experience from spending an enormous amount of time.
Exactly.
Yes,
hundreds and hundreds of proofs. Yeah.
This is not the that time 10 years ago I did an expedition down there. You know,
exactly.
even the great, you know, and he's a man who was a major, you know, influence on my career and somebody that influenced me a great deal in my work with aquariums. But Takashi Amano, even, you know, he made some trips, but this was not ongoing thing. These one expedition to each region was really touted. He's promoting this for years and years.
He was a very close friend of mine. You know, we gave a lot of conference together.
Right.
And I think almost every single expedition he made because he followed me. He wanted to know from me information and so on. Unfortunately, a very nice person and passed away much too early. But his daughter is very nice, and she Saori is a very kind person. And you know,
And they've done a
actually,
fantastic job with the
yeah,
brand in his
yeah,
absence. But
yes,
there's a famous photo,
yeah.
and I want to edit it into the video part of this interview as well. Of it's you and Amano. This is, you guys are. I don't know the year here. Everybody looks quite young in it. I think this was
Was
before
it?
Mr. Amano was all that famous. And then there's another gentleman with you. Maybe is it Fossa, or who's with you in this photo? The three of you are standing outside of maybe like and there's like a Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone is on a mural
Yes,
behind you.
this was 2004, I think. Yes, it was the owner of Eheim, Reinhard Eheim,
Okay.
Takashi, and myself, and they wanted to take this photo about. I had just
Because you're
told
looking
them,
like icons, you know,
yeah,
like a legends there,
Bruce
like a Marvel
Willis,
Comics
yeah.
characters of aquariums.
Yeah, it's actually in his book, this photo, in his last book,
Right.
which is far
Yeah.
another road. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you see the, I know you've been outspoken over the years on the aquascaping movement and this aquarium style, which has obviously become so very popular and features many fish. You're seeing, because the kinds of fishes most popular in an aquascape, I would bet that you probably discovered the overwhelming majority of them that are commonly used. And yet I have seen that you've been outspoken on the topic, just in terms of what exactly we're doing with this sort of thing. And I know you were close with Mr. Amano, who really brought the entire concept to the world,
But
with a very good intention. But
I want to interrupt here, because
yeah,
the people who so-called aquascaping or aquascapers, they misunderstood Takashi completely, because Takashi Amano, never ever used the word aquascape. For him, it was always nature aquarium.
this is a great point, Heiko. This is a big deal, what you're saying.
This is really something which came up, someone invented. You go to the British English Dictionary, you will not find the word aquascape. It doesn't exist. Someone invented this, and it was after Takashi. Takashi never did say this. And the opposite. When we were together, he said, you know, Heiko, I do nature aquariums, and you do more biotopes. This is okay. It is both okay. And I said, yes, naturally it's okay. I have nothing against it. The problem for me, and this is why some of those so-called aquascapers have something against me, is when I see them doing it in exhibitions. If this is in Jakarta, if it's in China, in Shanghai, Guangzhou, or if it's in Colombia, anywhere, they only do one and the same thing. 99 out of 100 aquascaped aquariums, which are made for 1 or 2 days, because then they are disassembled, no? They look very similar. They have, one is copying another. And the biggest problem I see, I just had this discussion with a #1 Italian girl. She's very good, Gloria. And I told her, why do all of the scapers always have in the middle of their scape a river? You watch out for this. It's all of them.
I've commented on it.
Yeah. Left and right, and a river in the middle. Yeah. And you know immediately one is copying another. Why you don't invent something new? Change it. Don't copy.
This winding sand path going.
Yes,
middle,
yes.
Right?
I just cannot look at it anymore. You know, I think it's without any idea, without any really thinking. You know, I do biotope aquariums, and they invite me all over the world. No? I have done so many in China. I have done them throughout Europe. I actually did I have done any in America, USA, I don't know. I have done in Central America, in Nicaragua, Guatemala, in Colombia, naturally, Ecuador. But when I do them, first of all, I think about the fish. Do I have the fish for the biotope? So when I have the fish that I know that they live together in nature in a biotope, then I do the biotope and I add the fishes. And then I can for sure say this is a biotope very near to nature, almost authentic to where they live. And you will see how they move. If you do this with many fishes, discus or whatever, you get a complete different perspective of fishes in an aquarium. People don't realize this, that fishes communicate. I cannot put a fish from Nigeria together with one from the Rio Negro River, with one from Australia in one aquarium. They never communicate. Fishes talk.
Right.
People do not understand that fishes talk. I have shown it. I have actually lectures done specifically about this, proving and showing to people that fishes talk. They communicate. They communicate with colors. They communicate with signs. They communicate sometimes only at nighttime with their eyes and so on. There's a lot of ways fishes communicate, but they don't communicate with a fish from another continent. It never worked. I see it hundreds of times. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and important is to know that it's in the gene of the fish. If it's not a hybrid, if it's a natural fish and that has been bred for many years or decades, he still communicates the same way as his wild brother. The communication remains.
I'm not always a purist in the sense of as a matter of sort of philosophy or even really principle, but I've noticed that over the years that, you know, putting a Southeast Asian fish with a South American fish, for example, or mixing with West African, etc., something just doesn't feel quite right with it. And every once in a while I'll still do it, and I always end up going, I kind of regret that. You know, I did it admittedly for a look, you know, or kind of the design of it. They seem to go with the scape somehow. Now we're back at this aquascape problem, but and I do it, and I always end up going, why did I do that? You know, I always have a sort of a feeling that just something's not quite right. Now I did notice that, you know, Mr. Amano would do that sometimes. He would have a barb and a tetra together in a layout, and it, you know, it worked in a photograph. It did always kind of puzzle me a little bit, and it sort of validated it for me in some kind of way. But yeah, there is definitely something not quite connecting, even just visually. Even the visual of it doesn't quite work in a way I can't really put into words. How do you feel that works, though, with, say, hybridized or domesticated discus, all these countless variations of discus that we have now? And they're kept in different kinds of, I mean, they're raised now so many generations in a bare tank with a sponge filter bubbling, you know, and this seems to be, I've said, is it not unlike a purebred dog? You have a Chihuahua is not a wolf anymore.
Exactly.
And so far removed, and the Chihuahua is happy to just sit on your lap and eat the food and never leave the house, and it seems perfectly content. Is that line blurrier or different with fish that have now become profoundly domesticated in terms of the environment we keep them in the aquarium? Is it what's your thoughts on that in terms of the appropriateness of their setting?
I have had naturally many problems with discus breeders about this, because I show them an aquarium and you can see it. I think the most published photo of mine of discus in an aquarium is in the internet. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of copies they're made, because discus is a group fish. Discus lives in groups. But like Hemigrammus blairi, or like Hiphosobricon amandae, the fish named after my mother, which I found a beautiful, small, you call it fire tetra, I think. It's a beautiful
Ember
fish.
tetra.
Ember tetra,
Sometimes,
yeah.
Wildly popular in
yeah,
planted aquariums.
worldwide.
Wildly popular.
Worldwide.
Yes.
And it's a nice group fish. And these fishes, if you put them in group, they really make your aquarium beautiful. And this is the very same with discus. So I put up an aquarium with 60 adult discus. F1, first breeding of one breed. And they swim left and right. They go like you cannot stop watching. I had once an exhibit in Hasselt, Belgium, and I made a 4,000-liter aquarium. And I put in 80 discus, adults. And I had lines of 25,000 people coming to my aquarium for 2 days looking at it, because the discus were going, what? Like they do in nature, what? They protect themselves, this swimming group. And all these fancy hybrids and colored discus today, they form no group. There's a red, a blue, a green, a yellow discus in aquarium. There's no communication. They don't swim normal. And in many cases, they go very skinny because they have to be fed very well. I mean, I really must tell you, I hate them. I hate people doing this. And I'm very fortunate I see in Italy, in Germany, in some parts of France now, more and more, not so much in England, people want to have wild discus because they have seen how the big difference. Or they want to have, like my best friend in Italy, he breeds F1, F2, F3 of wild ones. And the place I'm here right now, it's in Austria, called Zwettl. The man he's a very dear friend of mine. He always invites me because he has discus, only wild, and only F1, F2. I just published a few of the photos today on my Facebook site. I don't know if you go to my Facebook site. There's photos of his tanks. And he loves this. He just came back from Manaus to get from collectors some very, very beautiful specimens. And he's building about 25 miles from here a new installation, because here in his house, the place is too small. He has large aquariums, but he wants to have a new big place. And he just gets 380 wild adult discus next week. And I'm here also because I want to photograph this and document it. He knows the behavior. You look in his aquariums down there, and the F1, these swimming groups together with the parents. It's a harmony. It's a communication. It's just beautiful. It's just simply beautiful.
Glorious. Yeah.
And the people don't.
I know I say that with just behind me, I've got this hybrid fish, but the story here, actually, this aquarium is not even 24 hours old. I just put it up last night. And I obviously I have a way
but I can't see the fish. What fish you have there?
Yeah, it's there's the usual there's a turquoise, red turquoise. I think there's one, they're calling it blue cobalt or whatever these old strains are. And these fish I wanted to do wild fish. These were kind of a rescue because we had them at the shop. We got sent a double order. We placed an order, and then someone else on staff ordered the same fish again, and they came together. We had too many. Now we don't really keep these in my store because I say if you're wanting a disc, I almost don't want someone to be able to walk in and too easily just buy discus. It's a fish that I feel like you need some orientation. You need to know something a little deeper about this fish in particular.
Should read about it
because they were right. You need to read Blair's Discus, Blair's Biotopes. You need to know these things.
You can learn more than what discus costs, and you save money because my books are not so expensive. But let me tell
But
you
I
something.
knew that the fate was not going to be good for these fish. They're just in the regular holding system, and the way we keep most of the fish in the systems there. I just said, okay, I'm gonna let me at least home them temporarily in my own aquarium at home. And they're doing well. This is all not even 24 hours. They're already eating and this sort of thing. But I agree with you that the wild fish have a character and a depth that is not emulated well by the domestic fish, and but they're just everywhere now. And
Yes,
the wild fish are still, many people, they struggle with the particular, well, the internal parasites and these other kinds of illness problems, etc., are often, whereas I think people feel like the domestic fish have come from a situation where they've only known life in an aquarium,
exactly.
and they're therefore going to be easier to keep. Yeah, I don't mind the ones that haven't strayed so far from the wild strains, but some of these, obvious, I needn't tell you, have become almost garish and the crazy breeding. But it's not. I still see a little dog, a poodle, a little toy poodle, and I still have an affection for this animal, even though it's far removed from a wolf. And I know dogs and fish, it's a different animal, but I'm always just fascinated at the different opinions about what we've done with them, from the breeding and making it into an ornamental aquarium fish as opposed to the wild animal. But now, like you say, the successful breeding of the wild strains of discus should presumably make that more accessible to more people. And I assume they come without some of the problems of the wild collected varieties, just in terms of their immunity and these kinds of things. But yeah, I can tell it's a subject that is
No, I want to
is
mention.
troubling.
I want to mention something because I give so many conferences, and many of them also only about discus, and I have shown at least 100 times already your aquarium Heiko's lesson 2004. You remember? You remember
I
the
do, of
aquarium?
course, yes.
Yeah.
It's a big moment in my career.
You have in there, and actually I had suggested it, a group of hybrids, but only one line. This was the
Right.
original line of Schmidt-Focke of 1970s. And he named it the Solid Blue. And from this line, which was actually from wild fish, which I collected in the Rio Tefe, and he reproduced those fishes. If you only keep these fishes, this is one line. That's a line existing for now over 40 years. If anyone continues with this line, just one, and do not mix it with red discus, with other blue discus, with they call diamonds and called what else. You have seen on the photo, which is published everywhere on the internet, that they formed a group. They swim in one group because they are from one origin. It's like every other fish or animal. If they are from one and the same origin, you never have a problem, and you will always have a beautiful aquarium. So I'm not totally against tank breed discus, but only if there's in a line, in an existing line. I mean, Schmidt-Focke developed 7 different lines, and some of them still exist today. If you keep just one of these lines, red turquoise, brilliant, solid, green, if you keep one of these lines, only these together in one aquarium, you will always like it. You will always have fun. You will always have a beautiful aquarium. But not what, unfortunately, almost all the shops, I see it worldwide, do. The customer comes in, I like this red one, I like this green one, I like this blue one, give me one of each. Instead of these, inform the people who have no knowledge about discus that they shouldn't do this, because
It never looks right either. It just
never
doesn't
looks
look
right.
right.
No,
Yeah.
it looks
Yeah.
not only for me, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look. It looks awful. It looks really
Yeah.
terrible.
Especially in a
Not
planted tank, you have the
Yes.
green, this consistent green, and then against it you've got a yellow and a red, and it's all over the place. And that's never worked for me either.
And they do not
these-
want to understand that a discus should not have CO2. He doesn't have it in nature. He doesn't have it in the breeding establishment wherever they come from. So you shouldn't have it in aquarium. It's a shock for the fish. I told this to
They don't.
Takashi also.
Yeah, they don't respond well to it.
No,
Yeah, no, I
no,
agree. I've finally learned my lesson about that. It's
Yes,
really
yeah.
the behavior, the way,
Yes,
just
everything.
something is off when you have the CO2. in there.
Definitely, definitely.
I recently tried it here earlier in the year, and it was because I hadn't done it in a long time, and I regretted it, and ended up just taking the aquarium down and just regrouping. But I definitely agree, and that's a point I'm moving forward when I intend
Very
to
good.
emphasize
Very
in
good.
terms of
Do this, yeah.
this aquarium
Do this,
aquarium
please. Yeah.
planted
Do it.
aquarium discus,
Yeah.
sort of this
Yeah.
holy grail style. But you
Also
mentioned the
for
name
angelfish. Yeah, Schmidtfocker. Yeah.
Schmidtfocker, right? And that just reminds me of, again, my when I was much younger in my childhood, even like hearing those names like Burned Dagon was another. Surely you knew this Mr. Dagon.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I didn't know him, so I'm not aware of any
I
history
haven't
there.
lost anything.
Okay, because these are books I'm seeing when I'm, just a young man anyway. And this is a lot of it. That was sort of my gateway to even learning that such a fish existed back then. But and so another fish and another story that I think is important for people to know that I don't want to forget. And this could sometimes, Heiko, I think there's like urban legends of aquarium history that go on here sometimes that you're almost always a part of. So isn't there some controversy about who actually discovered what we call cardinal tetra?
Yes, I have written actually in my volume 1 of Blair's Discus. The whole story is in there. It was
Sure.
found by a German professor. His name was Scioli. And Scioli made trips to the upper Rio Negro in the early 1950s, actually 1952 to be exactly. And he found it, and with Indian tribes. And the next thing was that he was flown to Manaus by pilot of the company that existed at that time, Cruzeiro do Sul, who was a fish lover. And they had a conversation in Manaus, and this fish lover pilot, the commander pilot of this company, he was able to get some. The Indian tribes brought it down to Manaus, and at that time, Willy Schwartz did not exist, and Aquarium Rio Negro didn't exist. And he brought the fish back to Sao Paulo, where his home was. And the next thing was that I'm sure you remember a name, Fred Koshu. Fred Koshu, Paramount Aquarium.
Sounds familiar.
He was one of the first in the United States to bring in fishes from South America before World War II and after World War II. He was the first one to bring in Inesy, the neon tetra. And Fred, I have actually the tape, recorded tape of it. And Fred was the first one in the United States to get the cardinal tetra. This was end of 54 and beginning of 55, January or February. I have it all on tape. And Fred was a very dear friend. He actually came to my last party in Germany, to my 25th anniversary of Aquarium Rio. He came to my installation in Frankfurt, and he came to my party, and very nice gentleman. He was German too, as you may have known. So Fred brought this fish to a shop in New Jersey. I'm not. I have to listen to the tape again. I don't know if the shop was his, or the shop was the shop where Evelyn Axelrod later worked, because she worked at an aquarium shop. That's how he got to know her, which later then they married. And he had this shop, and Herbert walked in and saw these fish. In the meanwhile, the fish had already been described as Hiphosopricon cardinalis. This is why it's still in Brazil, in the Amazon, all the areas where it's collected, is still today called cardinal tetra. The paper exists. I have seen the paper because it was Stan Weitzman at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., who had described it. Hiphosopricon cardinalis. This is published. And then Smart Herbert was so intelligent, he found this in the shop, and then he went to the man who already at that time, the man whose name was Harald Schulz, and Harald Schulz later was also the man who described for him the discus after his name. In the meanwhile, the discus is synonymized because it was a false name also. And it was actually, I wasn't present, but I know that he paid him a very high amount of money. And I said, you describe this fish as Axelrodi. And when Schulz said, but there is a publication going on, we are too late. And this I know precisely. And he insisted and gave him some more money. You can falsify the dates. You can predate the paper of your publication of Chirodon axelrodi. Today it's in Parachirodon, but at that time it was Chirodon axelrodi, and he predated it. They had a big fight, and they went actually into court in New Jersey. But I think the same as with me, he bribed the judge, and the judge gave the sentence to the paper published by Schulz as Axelrodi.
And so Axelrod had only stumbled upon the fish in the shop.
In the shop. It
was never out in the.
No, he was never out
with the speedo in the water.
He lies
with
to
the
the
net.
whole world in all his magazines. It's all lies. It's all lies, except for my articles, because I never lied.
Right.
He was actually in Manaus for the first time in 1959. So 4 or 5 years after description, because he had...
After it was already found.
Yeah. He was there because he visited Harald Schulz, and he visited Willi Schwartz.
Very
and then he was another 3 or 4 times in the Amazon. That's it. That's all. But he
I wonder
published
if there
it.
could ever be a movement in the hobby to pay a tribute to the real founder and return to calling the fish, Cardinalis, I think you said was the original name. Just out of a sort of a, there's no point to it other than just to pay an homage to the, knowing this story to be more factually based than the other story, which is just what is the other story? There's a history of this fish already in progress in terms of the paper and everything else, so it's an interesting one because this is a fish everybody knows.
Sure.
Though people still call it neon tetra if they don't know anything about
no,
fish.
neon tetra is a
it's
different
a completely
fish.
different fish, of course, but right. What is there any particular backstory to the neon tetra in terms of its
Yes,
discovery?
it's all in my book. It's in my book. You have to read it. It's a Frenchman. His name was Rabau, a very interesting man because he there's actually a small booklet. Not his wife, the daughter of his wife. She wrote me many years ago and thanked me for publishing the true story about it. Because Rabau, he was actually a friend of Jacques Géry, because Rabau was also a Frenchman. And Rabau went to several times to the Amazon in the late 1920s, in the early 1930s. And he actually found the neon tetra 1934. 1934. And he stumbled over it because this is an amazing story. You should read this. He was after the liver of crocodiles, of caimans, because the liver of the caimans were used at that time in France for some chemical or some perfume or whatever. I don't recall it. But this is what he was. He was a hunter. He was actually an animal hunter. And he was living from hunting animals. But he stumbled over it when he was trying to collect caimans. Because one Indian woman had just collected these brilliant small fishes. Because they live in small, very small creeks and rivers or flooded areas, not in the main Amazon River, but in the area of Peru. The distribution is exactly in my book, all written. But he got the fish back to France. The story is so fascinating. It's also in my book of autobiography. Just to make a long story short, he brought the fish to a friend of Jacques Géry in Paris, and he then gave the fish to, at that time, the biggest wholesaler of ornamental fish in Europe was in Hamburg, Germany. In Hamburg, Germany, it was called Aquarium Hamburg. When he brought in these neon tetras to Hamburg, at the same day, there was Fred Koshu from Paramount Aquarium. Because Paramount Aquarium was established, I think, in 1928. Is one of the first and exporters of ornamental fish in the United States, Fred Koshu, Paramount Aquarium. And Fred was there at this very moment, and he said, I want some of these fish. And I want to bring it back to have it described. And he gave him, I think, 7, if I'm right. But as I said again, you have to read my book if you want to know about the Amazon. And it flew back in the first Zeppelin. Zeppelin, you know what Zeppelin is?
No.
Zeppelin were these gigantic airplanes they had before airplanes in Europe. Is that the name is Zeppelin? You find it. You go to the internet, look for Zeppelin. They were monsters. They were 50 or 100 meters long and 5 or 10 meters
Zeppelin.
high. Yeah, Zeppelin. Yeah.
Zeppelin. Yeah. Of course, yes.
You
A
should
blimp.
know.
We call it a blimp.
And he shipped these with a Hindenburg. This was one of the last flights.
Here we go. Yes.
I think it was 34. And
Right.
the Hindenburg crashed in New Jersey.
So famously, right.
Almost all passengers died.
Yeah.
Out of the 7 Neos, 1 survived. Only 1.
One neon.
So they called him.
So the first
So the
neon
first
tetra is
neon
coming, right?
tetra,
It's in the
yes.
Hindenburg.
Yes.
Wow.
And not only this, they called it from this moment on Lucky Lindy.
The one surviving neon tetra.
Yeah, because it was the first crossing the ocean, and
Yeah.
Lindbergh was the first man who crossed the ocean on a flight.
Right.
You remember?
Wow. I'm wondering if somebody who found this one Lucky Lindy and wow.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I think it was the friend or Fred Kosho himself. I don't remember. But Rabau, after that, they discovered that it's a new fish. He went back and he sold them all to, he sold him 4,000 neon tetras in end of 1934 or 35. Fred Kosher was waiting for him at the port of New York. Was this in the Hudson River or whatever? And with him was the man named Innes. Innes was the famous American who had written several books, much better than Axelrod ever did, and true books.
Right.
And Rabau said, I sell you, I have 4,000 fish, but I want $4,000 for it. I mean, imagine how much was $4,000 in 1934.
Yeah.
I figured it was more than $100,000 today.
Probably close to that. It was
I know
a
that
sizable amount of money.
Fred told me I need 1 week because I have to get the bank to get the money for you. And he got the money. He paid Rabau the 4,000. And then the neons were sold at $10 each.
Wow.
I don't know if he sold all 10,000 or 4,000. But anyhow, it's this amazing story behind this.
Who
and then
how
yes.
Well, I was going to ask. Didn't want to interrupt, but I was going to ask how then a fish like that goes on to be spawned in captivity. Is that something like do you know who said, okay, I'm going to breed this now and make it one of the most commonly known tropical fish on the planet?
You know that the neon tetra comes from a water which pH is around 6, while the cardinal tetra comes from a water the pH is about 4. So it took the people extreme long time to breed cardinals, but it was much easier to breed the neon tetra because it comes from less acid water. So I think they started to breed them after World War II. The first breeders of neon tetras were in East Germany. I know this because my mother went all the time there in 1948, 1949, 50. She even got imprisoned by the Russians because they thought she was smuggling fishes. It's not allowed, and so on. She was getting the neons and was the only one distribute them throughout Europe in the very late 40s until about 1952. She was the only one selling them. And I traveled with her to many places, so I know very well. And I never forget she brought them. At that time, no plastic bag existed. No? There were fish cans, no? Canisters. And then they had to be isolated because it's very cold. No? It's cold here now.
Right.
And it's sometimes in those canisters, no oxygen, nothing did exist. I remember one time she brought them to Paris to a very nice wholesaler there, Sidoli, and there were several fish dead. And he said to her, Mrs. Amanda, don't worry, I pay you more for the dead fish and for the live ones. And she said, why? Because we put them under a grill and the people use them for putting weight on the papers on the desk.
Interesting.
It's amazing. Huh?
Okay.
There's a lot. I could tell you now for a few weeks. I'm writing all of these things in my autobiography, but I hope to finish it someday. I have it here in my computer. I have already about 600 or 700 pages.
That'd be a priceless piece of aquarium history.
Yes.
So on fish like in terms of the acidity of the water, you point to the difference between, say, a cardinal and a neon. So when we get to something that is proven challenging to breed in captivity, like, we're using this word Altum angel, though I know now there's even a lot of discussion about which one is which and which one is real Altum and all this. But is there, I'm sure, certainly they've come to you, Heiko. Certainly they've come to you and said, Heiko, please tell us, what is the secret? And I know it's being done now and is getting more traction, but it's still a very, compared to other types of angelfish, scalare, these Altum varieties prove incredibly challenging to spawn in captivity. And is that due to, one, I'm curious if they're ever begging you for the secrets, two, do you know these secrets? And three, why is that fish so challenging? Whereas other angelfish, they're breeding in an aquarium with total neglect and plastic things in it. They're laying eggs everywhere,
Okay.
Because surely this is prized information, right? That how to breed this kind of fish.
The problem number one is that people do not read and do not inform. And people believe everything what's on the internet, what's been published. And every living person on this planet can publish anything in the internet without having to be checked. So this fish, it was Ross Sarkula who made me aware of it. It was in 1971. I collected the first Altums, and I learned since then about this fish like no one else. I know there are people who went back to the upper Orinoco one or two times and they think they know it all. They have no idea. This is the most...
No, I got to stop you right there, Heiko. I have to know, because this is a very important fish to me. So you're pulling up the first time the net, and there's Altum angel in there. I mean, what is this? I just need to know for a minute. You're like, oh wow, look at this. I don't even know what I'm asking. I'm trying to imagine. Do you know enough to be excited at that moment about the importance, let's just say, in the aquarium hobby about such a fish, or it goes on to be so important and you're like, yes, I remember the day I pulled it up the first time. I mean, this is just so fascinating to me. Is it something when it comes up and then you're seeing it coming out of the water and it's,
okay,
oh wow, look what we've got here.
First of all, you really have to know enough about geography and geology, yes? And the real Altum only lives in one area, which never ever one discus has reached to get to this area. No Altum lives in a place where a discus lives. And in addition to this, the Altum has, until this very moment, has never ever been bred. These are all lies. Okay. I'm writing a big book about it. I hope to finish it next month. I have written about it in my magazines. I have written about it in my books, but I'm reading, it's called Pterophyllum altum by Heiko Blair. And I'm showing all the 19 different populations I discovered. But all populations of Altums have one and the same identical piece of identification purpose, which no other angelfish have. I have written about 24 different angelfish populations in the Amazon basin. But an angelfish is never possible to go up or near a cataract or a waterfall, the same as discus. They cannot. The water is too much current. They cannot live. They cannot survive. Predators are there and will eat them. So no angelfish, like no discus, lives in or close a current or a waterfall. And all the Altums, they also don't live in any of such areas. They live like discus, and I always compare the real Altum angelfish with the real Haeckel discus, Symphysodon discus. None of these two have ever been bred. No one has ever been bred Symphysodon discus, and no one has ever been bred Altum. And now I come to the point. Why? The reason I see clearly is that both come from extreme black waters. Black water, really black water. You don't find them in clear water, you don't find them. They sell now all over the world Orinoco Altum. There's no Orinoco in the Altum. There's no Altum in the Orinoco River ever. It's all made up. They make up all these stories only for money. Money, 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 money. This is all. And why? Because not only because I made it very popular, because I was the first to find it, also because to me, the Altum, the real Altum, is the most majestic of all aquarium fishes.
Yes.
There's nothing similar. There's no other angelfish or no other fish that swims similar to the Altum. You can see it with the young ones. I go to my friend in Italy who has opened up a new shop, and he said, look, I'm selling these from the German breeder, but I know it's not Altum. Then I show them the wild ones here. There's a difference between day and night. The bred ones will never ever show or have the behavior of a real Altum. This is a big problem. That's why I'm writing this big book with the entire history and with 19 different populations. I went there again last September. I spent 1 month in the Upper Orinoco system. I went into all the Indian tribes, all the villages. I talked to all the Indians. I caught everywhere the Altums from that location with the parameters, with everything. So
what is
the problem is simply because the people pay so much money. The name became, what should I say? The name became something that suddenly every aquarist in Europe and maybe in America and naturally in China, in Australia, everyone wants Altum. So there are so many people now selling their angelfishes as Altums. And 90% of those are angel Scalaro from the Rio Negro. Because there's even scientific work. I don't know if you ever got to know Warren Burgess. He worked on this, and he proved that the Rio Negro Altum from Brazil is very close to the real Altum. But because they both grow very big, but the real Altum grows bigger, but the Rio Negro Scalaro can also grow very big. And from a distance, they can look similar, but they are different. And the difference is because they got geologically divided. No one knows 1.2 or 12 million years ago. The difference between 1.2 or 12 million years ago, that they got separated. And they formed, like it is with species always, they formed their own way to survive, to live, and their own morphology. But people don't seem to...
So is the real Scalare, is the real Altum, as you're describing, that has not been ever bred in captivity, even despite claims of such?
Many.
This fish are they available in the trade? Even is what we call an Altum in the trade?
Yes, you can.
Something a slightly different one of the many species.
When Venezuela didn't have these political problems, I always got them out of Venezuela because they are mainly Venezuela fish. But since Chavez and naturally now, the only Altums you can get out of Colombia, because the Colombians from a place called Puerto Inírida, they cross over to Venezuela by boat, and they buy the Altums from the Indian tribes. There are about 17 Indian tribes. They know very well that they can sell these fishes, so they collect them for those that buy them and bring them to Puerto Inirida. And the point is, they can never be in any area, like I said before, where there are rapids or where there's waterfall. They only live far away from the main river system, in lagoons, in still water. This is where they live. And they have developed during their evolution, they have developed a form of swimming, different from all other 24 types of angelfish from the Amazon basin. Because they had to survive to get, probably at those times, millions of years ago, over the cataracts, over the rapids, and so on. So they have a form of swimming which is unique to any fish. I have excellent photos of this. I bring it also in my book. They swim different from any other angelfish. Besides, there are other marks where you can recognize them. But it's a big. I get every single day. I mean, really, Jeff, every single day on internet, they send me photos. Is this an Altum? Is this an Altum? And you know, when I always tell them no, they are mad at me, you know, because they pay.
What is it? What is the fish? What is the fish that we're calling Altum then? That's not like when you. What's usually in the photo? That you say isn't
the most fish
Altum.
you have in photos on internet and which are sold are first of all hybrids. There is one. It was a man who actually made videos with me. This goes back into the 70s, 80s, after I brought them on the market. Because before the 70s, there was no Altum in the aquarium hobby at all. I brought the first ones in because I collected and imported from Venezuela. He insisted to breed that he was able to breed them, a German fellow. His name is Linke. And we were actually friends. And then he made a book with a cover of a hybrid. And I told him, why do you put this fish? I can see immediately if it's a hybrid or if it's a wild fish. I see it immediately, but 99% of the people don't see it. They just think of the name and they don't verify. Anyhow, I said, how can you do this? You have a real Scalara on the cover. It's not an Altum. This is a fish from the Rio Negro, Brazil. This fish I received from you. I said, no, I never sold you this fish. Anyhow, this man hybridized them, Altum with the Scalara from the Rio Negro. And since then, there's many people, actually many. There's one in China I visited. There's another German who's making a lot of money. He made so much money that he runs now Rolls Royce. He sells them for a fortune because the people believe in it. They pay 200, 300, 400, 500 euros for one Altum, which is not an Altum. So then they get,
because the real Altum again would not be easily acquired.
Well, yes, you can acquire them from today, the last 10 years or so, from Bogota, Colombia. Because they come to Inirida, Inirida sends them to Bogota. In Bogota are 45 exporters, and they export them. But they can only export them from 1st of July every year to the 31st of December.
Okay.
Because the government found out that this is a very valuable fish, and they banned the collecting and exporting of this fish during this period. After the 1st of January until the 1st of July, cannot be exported, cannot be catched, and cannot be exported. So whatever people import from Colombia, these are real Altum, because they have no Scalara. They never went up there, no Scalara. But there are some difference in the populations, and I show the difference in the populations.
Right, because I've bought fish as Ultims before from suppliers, and I'm just going, nope, this is not. There's something different. You know, the mouth area is not as upturned. You know, is more of a comes to more of a this kind of, just the shape. You can just, I mean, I don't know what I'm looking at nearly like you do, of course, but I know I've paid big money many times for something like this. Is not quite right.
This is what money. This is really
this is not quite right. No, it's very
I have hundreds and hundreds of people say, you're going to bring out this book, you're going to revolutionize, you're going to make a big problem for many people.
Seriously, Heiko, we need you, man, to set the record straight.
I show those bread albums. I have photographed them everywhere, in China, in Germany, everywhere. And I show the real ones. One can see the difference if they look.
I still maintain that had to be in some way, maybe a personally momentous occasion to, you know, when you're first discovering a species like that, so majestic and beautiful, and, you know, I mean, it's all exciting, but I'm sure there's those ones that just due to the sheer visual impact that they have, their elegance and just just all the characteristics, you know, that, you know, as we as aquarium hobbyists and aquarists and, you know, that feel like we have a relationship and a connection to these fish, you know, that I just still find it's just the coolest thing, man, that you were the guy that pulled that out of the water for the first time. We can only get it because you found it. And that's just, I don't know, that's just it's just really cool. I don't know how else to put it, man. It's a very, very important thing to all of us.
And I try to do this until my last day, I can promise you.
You're doing it, man. It's amazing. And it brings me to one other, there's two other categories that I have to touch on. We don't have to go as long on them, but one of them is the number of new species that have been found, or I would say, I mean, you've told me that, you know, you've found, I think, 11 new ones in the Amazon just this year.
25.
I can say from
25 last month. Yeah.
Or 11 just on the last trip. I think just in the last expedition there was 11 or something, you know, something like this. It's big numbers. And so I can say too, and I've been commenting on this about the past couple of years, that, and I'm hoping for your insight on this, is that we have had access to, now we have one particular importer of fishes here. It's Rehoboth Aquatics. His name is Toyin, is a West African gentleman. I didn't know if you randomly happen to know this guy or not, but anyway, we have acquired more new amazing tetra species this year than in the past 10 or 20 years combined. It's been just every week he's coming up with a list of fish that, now I have a gentleman that works for me. He's in his mid-60s. He's been in the hobby, in the trade, giving talks and everything. You know these guys, Heiko. They're like an encyclopedia of fishes, and just, you know, they've dedicated their whole life to it. And he's just, his mind is blown every week. He's like, I've never heard of this fish. Some of them don't even appear to be fully described yet. I sent you a picture of the one Nanostomus. You know, we're calling it super red pencilfish, but that's one example.
I know.
And and there's some other tetras too that, Heiko, they're so amazing.
I know.
That I'm going, how is it that if this fish was discovered any period of time ago, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they would be huge in the hobby because they rival the very most colorful and in-demand tetras. Where have these fish been all this time? And all of a sudden, so many, there's not little gray fish, you know, that a collector can appreciate. These are stunning fish that everybody's going, oh my gosh, and they just seem to be coming out of everywhere. Is this because of the? I had a theory that maybe all of the environmental impact is it maybe condensing these fish into smaller areas, and now there's more roads, and is it easier to get to some of these fish that are so amazing, but we're just now finding them? Do you have any? I'm sure it's not a theory for you. Probably know exactly why. There's
Naturally.
so many incredible fish all of a sudden available.
I tell you why. It's very easy. It's the point that they are building roads like never before into areas where no one could ever get to unless you had a helicopter or such a thing, which I did in many occasions. They have suddenly access to areas where there was no access for decades, for all the time before. They're building roads all across South America, everywhere, and mainly the Chinese. No? The Chinese now building a 16-lane highway all over the Amazon rainforest. I mean, everyone is building roads everywhere. And, I was just... Have you seen the video which those two young YouTubers have placed on YouTube about me? 1 hour and 7 minutes?
Amazing.
Okay, there was
one of the best videos out this year.
Okay, we went with them to an area no one had been also before. And I went back to the same place now. At that time, we went down all day long on a boat to reach this Indian village where was this one creek I wanted to look for. And just last month, I went back to that end of the road, and the boat this time was a high-speed boat, made 60 miles an hour. I could make the whole distance within 1 hour, what took us 1 day. So I'm just explaining this to you, how the progress is going in all these areas in a short time.
So all of a sudden, all of a sudden you can get there.
Yes.
So they're finding species. Do you know this one? The second name is Dicora, I think it is. It's a bluefish. It has a tail. The tail is almost like rummy nose, but it's blue, almost like Simulans or green neon. Or it's a blue fish with a checker tail.
You have to send me a photo. You have to give me a photo.
Stunning little fish. Incredible. We have this also, again, we couldn't track down a name for it. We're just calling it cherry red tetra. I've seen it in some of the German wholesalers have the fish too. Yes. SP cherry was just being called because it is the reddest red in a freshwater aquarium I've maybe ever seen. It almost glowing with a deep red color. Everybody, they see this fish, they're losing their mind. Do you know where this fish comes from?
Yes, I collected this fish.
Okay.
Millennium.
I figured.
You know why no one wanted it at that time? Because they all preferred the Serpent tetra and the Specklesi and the other red ones. And then came Amandae,
Right. But, because it doesn't get the red color unless it needs to be in a very nice plants and hiding places, and it needs a certain environment for the red to really come out, I found. When we just have it in a holding tank in the retail, for sale, the red is not, it's not as intense, but you get them I have some in an aquarium just by themselves. There's the big group of them alone in, a very nice planted aquarium with a nice water chemistry. And the red is it's just next level. People just lose their mind when they see them, and everybody asks about them. And I'm just shocked because sure enough, Heiko found this thing a long time ago. As I'm going, how is this fish not huge in the industry?
I wanted to tell you the Nanostomus. You sent me the only email arrived.
Yes. People are losing their mind when they see this fish.
I
it's so
know exactly where it was found, but it was not found by me. It was found by someone from Iquitos, but it was a place I always wanted to go because I have never been very, very far up the Nanai River, Nanai. And Nanai River is very close to Iquitos. But to go up there, you need at least, depending on the boat, 2 or 3 days. And there's a small creek, and I always wanted to go there. I actually wanted to go there when the pandemic started. I was invited, but then I couldn't go. And now they went, and I actually told them, you have to look all the way up in the Nanai River because no one has looked there before. And they did, and they find it, and it's nice. It's still unnamed, no name. Yeah. Because the
beautiful little fish, and their behavior, Heiko, is so unique compared to other, what I call pencil fish. They are active and gregarious. They're eating out of my hand. I'm working on the aquarium. They're not afraid at all. They're swimming around my arm. Charming, just very different. They're not at all skittish or nervous, as if they've never been, bothered by something. I don't know. It's a very unique behavior. People coming up to the aquarium, they're swimming right up to the glass. They want to, like coming up thinking they're getting fed. Just a really unique in the most stunning red color, just incredible color. And I'm just going, wow, how could this fish, this would be huge in the hobby by now if they had been around, I guess, long enough. Collected long enough or now bred in captivity, but
are they
one of the many incredible ones.
Are they exporting many? Do you know many arriving?
No,
I don't think so.
No. And when our guy gets them, is very small numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're selling in the shops for $30, $40, $50 a piece.
A piece.
Per fish, yes.
Per fish.
This cherry red tetras. We would pay $30 wholesale price for one. So trying to sell it for $60, $70, $80 is not realistic. So you don't, you maybe put it at 50. And you get the collector that buys a few of them. It's a shame because everybody sees them in the display tank and asks about them. And then, well, yes, we do have some for sale, but they're $50 for one. This is like a saltwater fish prices,
Yeah.
But just so many new, amazing species coming out that I'm just in shock when the guys that I know that have been in it a long time and they're real students of species and all the histories, they have no idea. I've never seen this. I've never heard of this. But the roads seem to make some sense. I mean, are you seeing things where the environmental impact or the deforestation and all these problems are not just ruining habitats, but maybe kind of forcing species into other, maybe their environment is shrinking in some kind of way. So is there more, do they end up condensed? Do they just go extinct?
I don't think this is the case at all. I think what I have found out, and this is worldwide, not only in the Amazon, is that every time I go back to a place which was destroyed, that the species is extinct. It's not found there anymore.
Yeah. They didn't move somewhere else. They're just gone.
Because take, for instance, you're talking about this pencil fish. Now, there were already 2 very colorful Nanostomus or pencil fish discovered in the Nanai affluents. The first was Morten Thaleri, after the Austrian man who moved to Iquitos, married, but he in the meanwhile just passed away. And he actually had a business here in Austria, and he was my client. And one day he came to my office and said, I'm going to move to Peru. I said, okay, but be careful. Anyhow, he found in the Nanai system going up, I said, there's very little discovered there. You can find new species. So he found this one. It was named in his honor, Morten Thaleri. And then a little further up, they found another pencil fish, also Nanostomus. It was also very red. I mean, they're both very red. But this is different, and they called it, they named it Rubro caudatus or Rubropinis. So I said, if they find in the lower Nanai already 2 new Nanostomus, they will find many more upstairs. And this will not be the last one. Or they didn't have a boat to go up there. Secondly, the fuel price now has gone so high up, and they all have only boats, so they need to pay a huge price for the fuel. I mean, a gallon
Sure.
now, where I was end of November, the gallon of fuel was already $15. How much
Right.
in America now? 2 or 3, 4.
Right.
So
So-
it's very costly for these people to go to these remote places. But there are fish in the
So, Heiko, I know
remote
I've-
places because they're still not all deforested. The deforestation,
Yes.
but it's taking place so fast. They found petroleum, they found gas, they're destroying everything. Peru is really damaged. Oh, terrible.
Yeah.
No, displacement. No, I do not believe in this at all. The fish,
They're just gone.
yeah, the fish like their habitat. I know, I catch so many fish. I know if one place in a creek or in a lake, I find a species, I always go back to the same place and I only find it there. Fish have their
So
have their
interesting.
place. This is what most people don't know. Naturally, there are some fish that only live on the surface, on the top. You probably know the name butterfly fish, Carnigella, Gasteropelicus. Those have immense distribution because they live on the top and they jump. And when the flood comes, when
Okay.
the water goes up 15 meters, then they can go
They
away.
can move.
But the small fishes, no, they cannot.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they would move, they would.
Heiko, the only other
eaten.
thing I wanted to
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I know I've kept you a long time, and it's been amazing. There's one other category that I'm just personally really so interested about, and you
Tell
can
me.
be brief about it. And I'm sure you're gonna be like, Jeff, why are you asking me this? But just in terms of what do you eat when you're out there on an expedition? Like what is the how I am just in awe of you're out there for a month sometimes in the Amazon. I mean, we're the average person living in the city. We're imagining the mosquitoes, the insects, the weather, the heat. I mean, surely you've got this down. You don't. It's second nature to you at this point, But is this just? Well, obviously, it's skills and sort of, I'm sure, patterns or habits that you've adapted over the many years going out there to where you just know what to do. But what can you tell me briefly about that side of an expedition? All the collecting and everything else aside, straight survival out there, Heiko. I can't imagine the near-death experiences you've had over the many decades in areas where humans, for the most part, there's no record of humans even ever gone there before. And there's Heiko out there for weeks and months. It's fascinating and truly the most interesting man in the world here. So please, what can you tell me about your adaptation
Okay,
to
first
these
of all,
expeditions?
I told you in the beginning I don't watch television. I don't believe in any of this, what they show, especially about nature. What I would say 99.99% of the people on this planet do not understand nature. I mean,
Yes.
when I talk about nature, I talk about untouched nature, wild nature, yeah, where no one lives, as you just mentioned, where no one goes. It is the most secure place on the planet. I always, in all my conferences, I always say one of the same thing. I say, to stay 1 year in the jungle where I go is not as dangerous as if you cross the street in front of your house just one single time.
Yeah.
That's more dangerous.
Okay.
The
I
people
get that.
make a misinterpretation about jungles because of the movies, because of the films. I took Amanda with me when she was age 4. It took me a long time. I could convince my wife. I said, I was with 4, so I want to take our daughter with 4. So I only was able to convince her when I took her to Blackwater River, because in Blackwater rivers are no mosquitoes, 0. They cannot survive there. So if you're in Blackwater rivers, you have no mosquitoes, you have practically no insects. So there's nothing. It's pure nature. She made with me 6 expeditions. One day she came to me when she was in her 2nd class at school, age 7. She said, Papa, you do so many conferences around the world. I want to do a conference in my school. And I'm only mentioning this because in the meanwhile, she did 3. She's now 12. And she starts every conference with one and the same words. She said, kids, first of all, danger, fear does not exist. It doesn't exist. It is all made up in your head or in the media or whatever. And she was 6 times in the jungle, never anything happened. She walks ahead of the Indians. She walks ahead of everyone because she knows there's no danger. There's 0 danger. She hardly ever has seen a snake. If she sees it, it walks away. There's no animal that attacks you. Naturally, you should always look where you walk. I mean, like on the street, you should always look where you walk. That's all.
Yeah.
But there's no snake that will attack you or bite you. There's no crocodile in the rivers. She caught, every 3 seconds, she caught a piranha. She swing from the first day on between the piranhas because she knows the piranhas will not attack man, never, ever. This is only in the movies. There's no fish that you have to be afraid of. Yes, you have to be, if you go in a lagoon and you see big electric eels, beels maybe 1 yard long, they can give you a tremendous shock. I had this already, because they have 850 volts. So you better swim around them. Don't go where they are. But there's nothing that you should be fear of. Now, what food is concerned, usually I'm, still go to most of the places in Amazon, also like now in the Congo or other places where there is no many roads. So I go by boat. So I have a very limited provision I take with me on food. But normally I eat the fish in nature. The 2 Indian guides I had with me this time on the 3 expeditions last month, while I was collecting my fish, photographing and so on, they were collecting fish for us to eat. So we ate very much fish in the morning, at lunch in the evening. And you will not, if you go to untouched areas in the jungle, like this time, those 2 guys that were with me, they couldn't believe we found so many fantastic fruits. Fruits no one knows. Delicious fruits.
Oh, I'm sure.
So the jungle has everything as long as it's not destroyed.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem. Then I have always with me black tea. I suggest everyone to have black tea because on the 980 some expeditions, most of them I had people with me and never anyone got sick. I gave them black tea. Yeah. And I never
because I'm picturing some night where you're curled up and they got some weird jungle sickness or something.
No, I never get sick. I mean, I have 4 malaria parasites, but I have to live with it. But there's no one can get malaria. This is the interpretation of Bill Gates and all these people talk about malaria. They have no idea about malaria. They have no idea about malaria. They just talk. Malaria, you cannot get malaria parasite only under one condition. If you or like me, or you are in a place where one person has a malaria attack, I already know when I have my attack. I had 58 already. So when they get the attack, a mosquito, I don't care which mosquito, comes and bites you. In the 2 hours only you have the attack, sometimes 3 maximum. And if this mosquito did bite you and then bites another person, then it's transmitted the malaria parasite. It's the only way. So
in that 2-hour window.
Yeah. Where do you get malaria? You get malaria in Mumbai, in all the big cities, in all the places where are hundreds and thousands and millions of people. You could get malaria if you stay in an Indian village. I never stay. I always go in my tent. I just one single time on this last trip, I went to the 2 guys. They wanted to see a Malacca, Indian Malacca, and the Indians gave us their Malacca to live, but the place was infested by cockroaches. There were so many cockroaches. I said, I could never stay here. I went because of the 2 guys. But, and I never take water. The people always take cans and tons of water into the jungle. I mean, are you insane? Drink the water from the river. I always drink, and Amanda, since age 4, drinks the water from nature. But naturally, if the water is too silty, yeah, like Orinoco or like the rivers that transport a lot of silt, then you just take the water and boil it. And as I drink tea, black tea in the morning and the evening, the water is always boiled. And with the boiling of water, you kill everything. So that's all you have to do. And this is the people that take, I have taken people with me, they have boxes full of medication. I never, ever take any medicine with me. No, none. Not only because I don't believe in medicine, also because I know they are only made there to make money. It's like, I'm not going to talk about coronavirus now because COVID-19, this is really terrible.
Yes, I mean, the whole thing.
They invent everything, but just to make money. And this is all about this. I'm completely, you know, I was in the Congo 1 month, and I came back. In Italy, everyone has his own doctor. No? Healthcare in Italy is 0 cost. It's all free. And you must have one doctor which is there for you anytime you need him. I never need him, but when I came back from Congo, she said, oh, come here, we're going to make a test with you. And they tested everything from top to bottom, you know, it took a week. And then she calls me up and she says, you know, we thought about Ebola, we thought about all these things they tell you, dengue. In your tests, I can only suggest to you, go back to the Congo. You come back healthier than ever before.
Right.
So, you know.
It's fascinating, fascinating. And this from someone who's been, you know, in the exact opposite environment. The place we would think would be the most filled with possibilities of sickness or viruses or whatever is, it's so true. It's just the opposite. You know, it's more dangerous. You're right. I live in the city. Walking across the street is probably more dangerous than walking across the creek.
Definitely.
In the deep jungle.
Besides this, you know, I never had a cold in my life. And now I'm here in Austria, and the hospitals are full with people of influenza. What do you call the cold? What do you call it? Grippe?
Or the flu.
The flu.
Right.
You call the flu,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here everyone has a flu. I don't understand.
Well, Heiko, I can't imagine.
What are these people doing?
Science, and I know this is a real emerging field out there, the study of the human microbiome in the gut. And you, man, you would be a really because now they're even doing things, and it sounds, I don't know how it sounds, but it's a legitimate therapy that's going on where they're doing like a fecal transplants, and they're really just trying to move the beneficial microbes from one person to another, this kind of thing. But just the study of the microbiome of somebody, of a human being like Heiko Blair, who's has this, I mean, the immersion in the deep nature for the whole, since 4 years old, I think would be so fascinating, just to know what that is, that where you haven't ever had a cold and you can go there and not experience you're drinking the water from the river, and it's just so foreign to the average sort of suburban or urban human these days. I think it would just be fascinating to know what is the gut flora and microbiome of such a human being look like. I think it's fascinating. But
tell them to invite
anyway,
me, to pay me.
Yeah, right. Yes, no, you should be well compensated for this contribution to science. But anyway, Heiko, this has been absolutely incredible. I'm glad we finally got to connect here. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but here we are. Understatement, but it's
this works. No? I can see.
Yeah, for sure. Different. So, but fascinating discussion. We could go on for hours and hours and hours.
Definitely.
So I'm definitely going to want to do this with you again at some point, maybe after that Altum book comes out.
Yeah.
The Angelfish book is one of an immense interest to me, as all your books are and all your publications. But that one in particular, just because if I had to pick a favorite fish, the Altum Angel would be
it's the most majestic fish.
Yes, and to get to speak to the man who actually pulled the first one up and identified it and contributed it to the hobby is just a big deal to me, and it's a real honor. And I just think you're one of the most important figures that we have still around to enjoy the stories and the contributions, man, and that you're still out there doing it is just it's an inspiration, is what it is, man.
Next month I'm going to the border, Argentina and Bolivia, with some friends from Argentina. They are just in Qatar. That's why I had to see the match also, into a mountain area where no one has been. So he has a 4-wheel drive, so I hope we can get into the areas I want to go. And already established is also the expedition to Angola, 1st of April. And there are a few others, India and so on.
I'm sure.
But tell me something. Maybe you can help me. I have, after 28 years, I lost my secretary. She just said from one day to another, Mr. Blair, I have been doing books and magazines and all your trips for those 28 years, but I want to do something else for the rest of my life. And she left me. So I'm trying to find someone who can continue helping me, because all my books have been published. I written and published all my books myself. I don't want anyone to change any word of it, So I need a person that knows the computer system, Quark Express, desktop publishing.
We'll put the word out.
Please.
We're going to put the word out.
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Because these days, Heiko, a lot of these things can be done remotely.
Remotely,
they don't even have to be. They don't necessarily have to be right there.
Exactly.
The files can be usually. They could be anywhere.
I offered her to do it remotely, but she didn't want to do it anymore.
28 years.
Yeah.
she's ready to have a few days doing something else. But no, we'll put the word out, and I'll definitely include that.
And give my best regards to Mike. And you or Mike, any one of you should come with me on an expedition to get the real thing. I think you should do it.
It's got to happen. It's got to happen.
Mike tells me this for at least a decade or more.
Sure.
But I think you have too much work. You cannot leave the place.
That's been a little bit of the problem, but
Yeah.
we're reaching a point where some of these experiences we need to do. We need to just
normally
we don't want any regrets about this stuff.
10
It would be
days.
just so unique.
10 days or 2 weeks, that's all it needs. 14 days maximum.
And it sounds like I needn't be concerned about
No, you don't need
what to eat,
no,
what
you,
to drink.
You just need to be concerned.
I don't need to get a bunch of various
trust me.
shots and things to
Just
come do
need
this.
to
Yes.
be concerned, trusting me. That's all.
Yes. Okay.
Doing what I
you're
say.
definitely
Okay.
you're the inspiration, Heiko.
Okay.
If you're out there
Okay,
after
thank
all
you.
these years doing it, I definitely trust you.
Okay.
But it's been a great conversation,
Same-
Heiko.
same
Thank
here.
You.
Thank
you
you.
so much for your
Okay.
time, man. Thank
Okay.
you. Now I
All
look
the
forward to
best.
speaking to you again.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye
same
bye.
to you.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.